All right, let's do this. Everybody take your seats. Check your weapons at the door, if you would. Appreciate it. Yeah, let's get started here. You are all coming to my channel. It is Friday, January 15th, 2021 AD. And if you're receiving this transmission, you are here to see America, the Cold Civil War. Yeah. Well, I hope you all had a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. This video today, I think, is something I wasn't looking forward to making. However, given the current circumstances of the United States and perhaps the world, I think, yeah, my channel is probably going to take a more political route. Even though, I talk politics all day long with, friends and family, even if they don't want to hear about it. I thought that I would bring my thoughts to this channel and talk about what's going on, how we got here, and why this country is currently getting into a handbasket on its way to hell. It's that bad. And I think if you have been watching any amount of media in the last week and a half, you'd probably find it hard to disagree. But let's talk about why I say America is currently in a cold civil war and why this cold civil war has a very, very significant chance of going hot, and why that's really a bad thing, especially if you've got family, you've got loved ones that you care about. You don't want them living in a country that is on the brink of a potential civil war. Because there are so many different factors at play, it's really hard to tell how it will go. And that's usually the condition of a Cold War, is that it is ripe for a hot war, but because of the uncertainty, there is this stalemate. And we are currently in the beginning stages of what I believe is this Cold War stalemate that is getting progressively worse. But let's talk about how we got here, because there's no sense talking about a problem and potential solutions if you don't know how the problem came to be in the first place. So if you have been watching the channel at all, on July 4th of last year, I did a video called America from a Nation to a Country. And not to toot my own horn, but I think that video is rather prescient considering where we are today, barely 6 months later. Yeah, it didn't even take a whole year. It took just over half a year to get us here. And why nations thrive and countries merely just survive, or in the worst case, they collapse. Nations are what stand the test of time. Nations have what I called in that video the four corners, the four legs of the chair that it's able to stand on. And that is homogeneity as it comes to race, as it comes to religion, language, and culture. And the four legs of the chair are essential for a nation. It defines the nation. And if you knock out one of the legs, a three-legged chair could possibly stand, but a two-legged chair falls over, and a one-legged chair is just a stick. It does nothing. So without the four legs holding up your nation, you are looking at the circumstances that face a country. And without that homogeneity, that cohesion, keeping the people together in a state of peace, in a state of order, you need that cohesion. And without it, people sometimes resort to desperate measures, or they look to a state to come in and become that cohesion where they lack it in their own communities. And we're seeing that today. This policy of the United States becoming a country, whether it be via demographics or economics or what's taught in schools, this has all led us to our current predicament. And it should have been seen far in advance, but nonetheless, here we are. And so what are the circumstances we're dealing with today that have plunged us into this cold civil war? Well, we see that we have a nation completely polarized, where you have North and South, you have the opposite ends of the spectrum, and there is really no middle ground. One side, if it tries to mitigate its beliefs and meet the other side in the middle, are immediately called traitors by this side. And if another side says, well, if I meet the other pole in the middle, they will come and they will meet me. But then when they walk out and they try to meet that other opponent in the middle ground, oftentimes we're seeing is that the polarized center of this side will simply call these people just as extreme or just as unreasonable as they were when they were on their side of the pole. So they quickly retreat back. This is what you have. It's like anybody who tries to meet in the middle is quickly called out as a traitor, or the other side sees no distinction and doesn't care if they come with an olive branch and a peace offering. They immediately scare them back to the other side of the pole. So you have this polarity. And we see it's based on racial, ethnic, and now political lines. And as I mentioned in the July 4th video, From a Nation to a Country, ethnicity and race are inseparable, right? You don't have ethnicities without a fundamental understanding of the race from which they sprang forth. Korean and Japanese sprang forth from Asian races. The Caucasian race is where ethnicities of French, Italian, German, English, etc. come from. And you don't really begin to understand these ethnicities if you don't understand the origination of their individual races. And the reason this is important is because it is the one thing that is readily apparent to all people is, what is your race? First and foremost, that's usually what you can tell about someone. And if you're familiar enough with that race, you can also distinguish among the many ethnicities that would be considered a part of that race. This is what people, whether for good or evil, are able to deduce about someone at first sight. And it easily becomes a situation where I don't trust these people and I don't trust those races. And this is what happens in heterogeneous countries, where there is lack of homogeneity and there is heterogeneity. People will carve out parts of the landmass and they will designate it their tribe's area. And this happens in every civilization, in every culture, where you have different tribes of different races or different ethnicities. They do not commingle well, and it's never happened. And America was the grand experiment where hopefully we could do something where we could overcome that. But America's only been here for 250 years and change, and mankind has been walking the earth now for 10,000 years or more. So yeah, when you see racial and ethnic polarization, you naturally get political polarization, because if it's my team versus your team, or my tribe versus your tribe, we will necessarily draw political lines, as in we believe in X and you believe in Y, and you get political parties as a consequence of that. And the political parties, naturally, because they want more power, will drive more wedges in between these several groups. And when they do, it only increases polarization. And you see that now in America, where anybody who believes in this is a white nationalist or an extremist, or anybody who says something about there not being, dozens of genders, well, they belong to that group and that group is evil. Therefore, we put them on that side of the pole. This is what's caused the polarization. And I mean, I wasn't alive for the 1960s, but I understand America was extremely polarized in that era as well. However, in 2021, we are far more racially diverse and therefore ethnically diverse than the America of 1967, 69. So yeah, this is a problem, and I don't see a polarization going away anytime soon. In fact, it is what will drive a Cold War possibly into a hot war. As long as these racial, ethnic lines exist, you will have political polarity, and the political polarity will be probably too far of a gap to bridge. But what's making it worse? Well, economic stagnation, right? So because of the conditions of 2020 and the plague, as it were, we are having a unprecedented level of economic stagnation, possibly creating recession and eventually depression level poverty. Now, this is bad enough on its own, but if you throw racially and ethnically diverse people who are politically polarized into this situation, it becomes Lord of the Flies pretty quick. As in, if there are less jobs and less money to go around, me and my people need to figure out a way for us to survive these hard times, and we will push out outsiders even further than they were before, because if they take what is ours or what could be ours, that will leave us at a disadvantage. And this economic stagnation drives this polarization the worse it gets. And as a consequence of the stagnation, we've seen permanent business closures. And I want to say an article came out a couple months ago, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, that the business review board, Yelp, probably the most popular website if you want to review businesses or especially restaurants, they've did a study on the closures of businesses that were on Yelp as advertising. And they've determined that 60% of the businesses that have closed on Yelp in 2020 are permanent. That's scary. That's very scary, because those are real people that maybe relied upon those jobs to feed themselves, to put a roof over their head. Maybe they were retirement businesses that people had worked their whole lives to build. Like some guy was a firefighter or a plumber and his wife was a nurse or what have you. And they saved and saved and saved. And their kids are out of the house and they want to just open that Italian restaurant, right? They want to open that Italian restaurant that serves food like grandma used to make. And that's their dream. That's their retirement gig, is they want to have a restaurant and they want to manage it. And they want that to be their nest egg and to make them money. And maybe they can sell it to someone else and make a profit off that. Now that place might be closed because the new rules and regulations have told these businesses, we can't let you open because if you do, it's a public health risk. And people are now looking at it, well, I have public health risk over here and I have my economic future over here. I care about public health, but I care more about my economic future. You need to really sell me on this to get me to give up this. And as time has gone by, people don't care about this anymore because they're looking at an economic future that is so bleak, they would rather take the risk of getting sick or other people getting sick if it means they have a chance to make money and to feed, clothe, and house themselves. So this economic stagnation, because of permanent business closures and new rules and regs, is creating more polarization. And travel restrictions. People can't go anywhere. So even if your business closes because of new rules and regulations, there's no guarantee that you'll be able to leave where you are. You might be locked down in your country or in the United States, fortunately, a lot of places have lifted it, but a lot of countries right now are telling you can't go anywhere. So even if you hate the conditions here, you're going to have to learn to live with it. They feel captive. And this leads to the third part that is driving the cold civil war in America and perhaps beyond, and it's media overload. Because if you can't go anywhere and the new rules and regulations tell you your business can't open, what do? Well, you sit at home and you watch TV and you get inundated with media that is mostly disinformation. And now we have the new specter of censorship in America. And I'm going to do a separate video on censorship because it deserves its own. This should scare the living hell out of every red-blooded American that loves the Constitution and this republic, because censorship is one of the reasons the American Revolution was waged. It was the suppression of speech. It was the inability for people to elect their own officials. Does that sound familiar? And it was the confiscation of property and the elimination of what the founders of this country considered God-given rights. And censorship is the elimination of the right to free speech. As in, you will consume media disinfo, which is considered good speech, and you will be censored from expressing speech that is considered unacceptable. Therefore, what you want to say or what you want to consume will be considered disinfo, and what you will be fed by the media will in fact be its own disinformation. So you won't be able to tell what's heads or tails, because once the media has fed you enough disinformation, you just don't want to hear any information. You will just consider anything that's given to you at face value to be false, because you have now learned that the media disinformation that is now overloading your system can't be trusted. Therefore, no information can be trusted. And the censorship won't matter at that point, because the trust that is broken between any kind of media consumed by the public that is now considered tainted and no longer worth considering, the censorship will have done its job. Your only option will be to go to whatever is uncensored, and once you distrust all of that, you won't even care what's out there being said to the contrary, because you will assume it's all being done under the purview of a government that is now force-feeding you information it wants you to accept and eliminating anything it doesn't want you to accept. So, because of the media overload, because you're at home watching TV or on the internet, and you can't make a living, and you know the country is racially, ethnically, and politically polarized, it leads to a cold civil war. And the longer the stagnation, the polarization, and this media overload with disinfo and censorship goes on, these three points of the trident is what's going to do in the United States. And I say that with no, I'm not saying this as though I'm happy about it or I told you so. This is just what I see going on. And these three things are in place for a reason, because I truly believe that there are people abroad and domestically who want nothing more than for the idea of this to become something different. And the way you get rid of this is you tear it down with these three things. And you create conditions where people are just so fed up that they're willing to resort to anything for this to end. And if they resort to drastic measures, which, if it goes hot, they will, the state will then have the ability as the authority to come in and to crack down on what they believe are the extremist or the undesirable elements that are creating conditions that Americans don't agree with. Maybe Americans do agree with what these people are doing, but the state, because of this, will drive people to do things they normally wouldn't do, and the state thereby can come in and rule with an iron fist. And the media, spreading disinformation, will label these people every name in the book. And that's how it happens. That's how Cold Wars go to hot wars, and that's how hot wars are dealt with by dictatorial and totalitarian states. They create the conditions for revolt, and when revolt happens, they come down on it like a ton of bricks. But we look back to history and say, well, where else have we seen similar circumstances play out, and what can we expect going forward in the future? Well, we look to history, and we look to the United States and the Soviet Socialist Republic, the USSR, which would have been Russia, and the Cold War, which happened between America and Russia, taking place between 1950 and 1990. Some people say it took place earlier, like right after World War II, which is, you could argue that, and that it actually ended a little later than 1990. But I think 1950 and 1990 is like a nice round figure, 40 years. Yeah, 40 years of the Cold War between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. And what was it over? Well, it was two superpowers vying for dominance in the post-Second World War, in the post-world of World War II. So yeah, you had two things that were very polarized. You had the Democratic Republic of the United States, which was based upon individual liberties and capitalism, and you had the Soviet Union, which was based on authoritarian state control, limited individual rights, collective ownership of property, which meant state ownership, and of course, a communistic model of economics. And why didn't this go hot? This has been the debate for many years now is, well, why did the Soviet Union and the United States ever go to war with each other directly? I mean, we know that the United States got involved in the Vietnam War. The Soviet Union definitely played a part in that by arming and possibly giving the North Vietnamese military resources to fight the United States. So they, by proxy, were able to introduce weaponry to an enemy of the United States, and we know how that ended. It was a total war of stagnation. I think 1 million Vietnamese died, 55,000 some U.S. troops died, or actually more, and the U.S. left. And Vietnam eventually fell to the North Vietnamese, and it's been a communist state ever since. I've actually been to Hanoi. I've been to North Vietnam, and yeah, it's sad. It's depressed. It is extremely poor, but the people make do. I mean, they're very friendly. When they saw me coming as a a 6'3" white guy from the West, they saw like a giant money bag walking down the street. Everybody wanted to sell me something. Yeah, very nice people, but you could tell like the infrastructure was just rotting. Like there were telephone lines running everywhere. It was almost like a spider web of telephone lines because none of the telecommunications systems had been updated since probably the 70s. So all you had were just more telephone lines running into and out of shops and people's homes. There's no fiber optic cable. There was barely any Wi-Fi. So it was just stuck in this like time warp where it was constantly like 1978 technology. That's what it felt like in Vietnam. And the Soviet Union helped orchestrate that for Vietnam. And the United States got even with the Soviet Union because the Soviet Union tried to invade Afghanistan in the late 70s. And what did the United States do? Well, the United States armed the Northern Alliance in Afghanistan, the Mujahideen. And yeah, the United States got even with the Soviet Union because the Afghan rebels had Stinger missiles that were able to shoot down Soviet helicopters, and they had all sorts of other tech. And the United States sat back and watched that proxy war go on, and the Soviet Union took a beating in that, and they had to pull out of Afghanistan. Funny enough, the United States had to go back to Afghanistan and fight the same guys that we were helping against the Russians. So yeah, that's how foreign wars usually go. Today's friend will probably be tomorrow's enemy and vice versa. So it didn't go hot between the United States and the Soviet Union, though, outside of a proxy war, because of MAD, which was a catchphrase back in the 80s, which was mutually assured destruction. By 1954, I believe, the Soviet Union was a full-fledged nuclear power, and they had nuclear weapons. I think the Tsar Bomba, which was like the largest nuke ever tested on a mainland, it was up in, I think, was it Kazakhstan? I'll put a picture of it, but it was the largest nuclear test by a superpower, and there's footage, aerial footage of the bomb going off. It looks like just this massive mushroom cloud smokestack on the surface of the earth going up into space. It's huge. So when the US found out the Soviet Union had this capability, we had a condition of mutually assured destruction, which was, if you bomb us, we'll bomb you. And then the whole world will look like a series of mushroom clouds. And that's a no-win scenario, right? That's basically us fighting a war where if you try to kill us, you can essentially kill us as easily as we can kill you. We'll bomb your cities, we'll bomb your allies. If you bomb us or bomb our allies, we have the same weapon you have. So nuclear weapons were a blessing and a curse in a way. It was a curse because it gave mankind this ability to literally wipe out cities of hundreds of thousands. It was a curse for being such a, I guess you would say, efficient but ruthlessly effective weapon, and it just would level cities. But because of that efficiency and because of that immense power in such a weapon, it created a scenario where the two superpowers were too afraid to make the first step because one could use their weapons against the other. So we just had a standoff for essentially 40 years. But the US ended up winning, and it only won by virtue of our economy and the technology that was created on account of our economy. So because of capitalism and because of innovation and because of our system of economics, we were able to beat the Soviet Union, because in communist countries, you really have to rule by the implementation of fear and terror. You have to scare people into doing what you want, or you'll disappear them to the gulag, or you will summarily execute their family. In the United States, the incentive is, come to our country, we'll give you a first world country to live in, which can protect you with nuclear powers. Oh, and by the way, if you help us fight these guys, we'll make you rich in the process. How's that sound? That's the carrot versus the stick. And communist countries, especially this size, they can't sustain that forever. And Mikhail Gorbachev knew this, that the United States was essentially going to win the Cold War, develop enough technology that would surpass the Soviet Union, where the US would be able to go into a hot war with the Soviet Union and beat them. So he said, hey, it's been great, but I think it's time we sat down and we talked terms. And eventually the Soviet Union agreed to reunite East and West Germany, and Russia gave up communism, but it's still a bit of a totalitarian state. I mean, it still definitely has those hallmarks, but it's not nearly as bad as it used to be. Now, why is this scenario a good lesson for America in its current civil war? Well, the same conditions existed, right? You had economic stagnation in the Soviet Union. You had two polarized countries, and the media overload in these countries, despite not being, an era where social media existed, but you had news networks that were state-owned. You had American news networks saying that, well, if the Soviets bombed this, it would wipe out these people. And then Chernobyl happened. I think the Soviets are starting to lose this thing because they can't even control their nuclear reactors. So it broke because the United States was able to come out of the economic stagnation ahead of the Soviet Union's economy stagnating. Which it was essentially stagnant from the 1960s onward. And because of that, our technology got better and better, and theirs just got a fresh coat of paint. Our tanks were able to go from, 25-pound guns up to 50-pound guns, and our planes became jets, and the capabilities of those jets, they were reaching speeds of Mach 4, and Soviet Union still had their same jets capable of reaching Mach 2, and they would just give them a fresh coat of paint. That's fake. So this was a real breakthrough for the United States, was that into the 70s and 80s, our economy really kicked into gear after Jimmy Carter left office, and the Soviet Union at that point knew the game was up. But the problem with our scenario here in America is these are two separate countries. Cold War in America is happening right here at home. The two polarized parts of this country can't go anywhere. There's nowhere to flee to. So it's almost like having to live in a house with a person you hate. Like, let's say two people are married and they end up having a very bitter and harsh divorce, and the court says, well, you still have to live in the same house together. You're divorced. I mean, you want nothing to do with each other, and when people ask you about the other, you speak ill, and it's clear that there is no love between you at all, but we're going to make you occupy the same house. How long is that broken marriage that is now forced to live in the same space? How long is that going to take until it goes hot? Until somebody throws a dish or a frying pan or what have you? Not too long. The lack of space in America with two very polarized camps, left and right. This is what is the worst part about this American Cold Civil War is we don't have oceans separating us. We don't have separate places to go. It's like, you know what, fine. You want to do things your way? You want to live under communism? You want to subject your population to midnight arrests and censorship and executions at random, go do that in the Soviet Union. We don't do that in the United States. This is what we do over here. So we're going to do it our way. You do it your way. And if you try to attack us with your weapons, know that we have the same kind. You could do that because there is that separation. The line is drawn between the two countries and they occupy different spaces. In America, you're talking about all of these problems similar to what existed between these two different countries, but sharing one landmass. And the question is, will it go hot? I don't know how we don't go into a hot war because of the fact that we have all of these going on and people aren't giving up ground and we don't have separate places to go. So yeah, again, this is a bit of a downer. I know this is my first video for 2021. I didn't want to start it like this, but just watching what was going on TV, everything with the election debacle to the vote certification debacle, then the Capitol, the Walmart shopper insurrection, watching that on TV, which is just a joke. Yeah, it's going nowhere good. And now Washington, D.C. is basically a demilitarized zone where nobody is allowed in unless they're on official business. You've got troops on every corner. You've got fences around the Capitol. It looks like a country that doesn't trust its government, and the government is now caught in the middle of these conditions they've created in their populations. They've polarized the people. They've given the conditions of economic stagnation, and people just want to work. They just want to make money. If they've got to deal with the racial and ethnic and political polarization, they at least want to have a living. That's been removed from them, and they're getting overloaded with media they can't trust. And that's what happens in banana republics and in communist countries. They create the conditions and they lose control of the public. And then what do? They come in with tanks, with jets, with troops, and they crush any resistance and claim it's so we can hold everything together. But if you're already putting up fences around your capital and you have to bring in National Guard and all sorts of entities to protect your very capital, it means you don't trust your people, and your people obviously don't trust you. And this is why I think we're looking at a cold civil war in America going hot. And if I have to make that move, if I have to make that video, I'm probably going to be in a bunker somewhere, hopefully, or I could be disappeared to the gulag. Who knows? Knock on wood, right? So yeah, this is where we are, and like I said, I'm going to do a couple videos on this topic. Like I said, I don't necessarily want to devote this channel to politics, but it's something I care about. Any thinking person who enjoys my philosophy videos or my literature series videos, it means you're a thinking person. If you think for yourself, this current events should be on your mind. It's, Socrates said, simple minds talk about other people. Average minds talk about events. Great minds talk about ideas, okay? These are events, and these are the ideas behind those events. And we need to come up with ideas on potentially how we can get out of this before it tailspins and we don't have the option. All right. Once again, this is the Hoplite channel, and you've watched America's Cold Civil War video. I will put a link, as I said, in the description for the video I did in July, America from a Nation to a Country. If you want to go back and watch that in conjunction with this, I think it might shed some more light. But in any event, I think I will pick up next with a video on censorship, especially considering our Soviet friends. They basically wrote the book on that in the 50s and 60s in their part of the world. So we'll discuss that and how I see similar threads between the Soviet Union's version of censorship and the kind of censorship we're now seeing in America and how it appears to only be getting worse. But nevertheless, I hope you're doing well, as good as you can be doing. Look after each other. Share this video if you think anybody would get some value out of it. If they're interested, hopefully they're interested, because if there's ever time to be interested in the future of your country, it's today and it's now. And we need more people to voice their opinion. And my solution to censorship, before you even ask, is more speech. the solution to censorship is more speech, always. Uncomfortable speech, uncomfortable thoughts cannot be done away with by simply muting them or blacking them out. More speech is the answer to disagreeable speech, not less speech. Always, yeah, without exception. Okay. Thanks again. I appreciate everybody watching this. Tune in next time for the censorship video. Hopefully I'll get that out here in the next couple days. Yeah, until then, take it easy.